At the end of January 2023, reports emerged of a major attack on an important military site in Iran. While details were limited, speculation quickly arose that it had been carried out by Israel. But despite the obvious significance of the incident, it's received relatively little coverage, and even Iran appears to be playing it down. So, what exactly seems to have happened, and why hasn't it received more attention? Hello and welcome. If you're new to the channel, my name is James Kerr-Lindsay, and here I take an informed look at international relations, conflict, security, and statehood. In the modern era, we often think of conflicts as very public events, clearly defined actors openly attacking each other. But there is, of course, a far more clandestine side to conflict. Parties can and often will engage in a far more covert battle against each other. This may include anything from supporting proxy groups such as terrorist organisations to carrying out cyber attacks and hybrid warfare, where social media can even be used to create chaos and dissent. But this shadowy conflict can equally include traditional military operations such as missile strikes and sabotage. While this may all sound very conspiratorial, we readily accept that open declared conflicts will often include a clandestine element. The same therefore applies as much, if not more so, to undeclared and cold wars. In fact, the covert element may often be even more important as the sides try to avoid escalation and direct armed conflict. A fascinating example of a long-standing confrontation fought mainly through covert and indirect methods is the conflict between Iran and Israel. Over the course of almost half a century, these two countries, key actors in the Middle East, have been engaged in a serious confrontation. But while we often think of this as a war of words, there is in fact far more to it than that. Israel and Iran have a fascinating history. Formerly known as Persia, Iran was once home to a large Jewish community. However, our story really begins in 1947. As Britain prepared to give up its colonial control over Palestine, the United Nations decided to partition the territory between its Jewish and Arab Palestinian inhabitants. But while the plan was supported by 33 of the then 57 members of the UN, Iran, along with every other Muslim majority member, opposed the decision. Likewise, even after Israel declared independence and fought off an attack by its Arab neighbours, Iran was one of just 12 countries that opposed Israel's UN membership. But despite this difficult start, in the years that followed, the two countries in fact built up a strong relationship. Although Iran never formally recognised Israel, their respective ties to the West, as well as mutual concerns about growing Arab unity, saw them work together across a range of fields. As well as economic and energy cooperation, they also developed a strong security relationship, including intelligence sharing. And while the 1967 war, which saw Israeli forces seize control of the West Bank and Gaza, was deeply unpopular amongst many ordinary Iranians and therefore strained ties, the two countries nevertheless maintained good relations throughout the 1970s. However, all this would seemingly come to an end in January 1979, when, after years of brutal autocratic rule, the Iranian monarchy was overthrown. Just weeks later, a leading dissident Shia Muslim cleric, Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini, returned from exile to lead the new theocratic regime in what now became the Islamic Republic of Iran. On the surface, the Iranian Revolution saw a sharp deterioration in relations with Israel. Attempting to build its credentials with the wider Muslim world, the new regime used the plight of the Palestinians to call for the destruction of the Jewish state. But despite the public hostility, behind the scenes, the two states at first continued to work together. Facing a mutual threat from Iraq, Israel even supplied arms to Tehran during the Iran-Iraq War. However, by the middle of the 1980s, things were changing. Following Israel's invasion of neighbouring Lebanon and the signing of a peace agreement between Israel and the Palestinian Liberation Organization in 1993, Iran stepped up its support to both militant Shia and dissident Palestinian groups. These included Hamas, which has now established itself as the main force in Palestinian Gaza, and Hezbollah, a Shia organisation that dominates Lebanon. Both have frequently staged operations against Israel, including terrorist bombings and missile strikes. At the same time, Israel has also staged attacks against Iranian targets. For example, it appeared to have played a key role in a 2020 US drone attack that killed General Qasem Soleimani, the head of an elite international unit of the Iranian Revolutionary Guards, and widely credited as the mastermind of Iranian military activities across the wider Middle East. Meanwhile, as the new millennium dawned, a major new factor arose as reports emerged that Iran was developing a nuclear weapons program. Such fears have been raised by continuing threats by Iran to destroy Israel. For example, in 2015, the Iranian supreme leader vowed that the country wouldn't survive until 2040. Seen as an existential threat, Israel has repeatedly threatened to attack these nuclear facilities, as it did against nuclear programs in Iraq and Syria in 1981 and 2007. In the meantime, Israel has already admitted launching cyber attacks against Iran's nuclear facilities. So, what was this latest incident all about? At this stage, it's hard to say with absolute certainty. What we do know from the information that's emerged is that around midnight local time on Saturday the 28th of January, a munitions factory sited next to a ballistic missile research facility in the city of Isfahan in central Iran was attacked by several drones. Beyond that, there's little firm information. While Iran has accepted what the foreign minister has called a cowardly attack, it says that the mission failed. Insisting that it shot down the aircraft, it said that one had merely caused minor damage and that there'd been no casualties. However, other reports suggest that the strike did in fact do significant damage. Images of the attack caught on camera seem to show a large explosion. Regardless of what exactly happened and how much damage was done, the obvious question is, who carried out this attack? The most likely suspect is, of course, Israel. As noted, there's long been growing concern about Iran's nuclear capabilities, fears that are growing as international efforts to control Iran's nuclear program appear to be faltering. The fact that Israel now has a new government led by Benjamin Netanyahu, a long-standing hawk, has led some to suggest that this was designed to send a message to the government in Tehran. But there's also been speculation that others may have been behind it. Most obviously, the United States. The antagonism between the US and Iran is well known. However, the Department of Defense has officially denied any involvement by American forces. That said, suspicion of a US role has been fed by the presence of the CIA director in Israel just before the attack and by the US Secretary of State Antony Blinken visiting the country just afterwards. But the finger of blame has also been pointed elsewhere. Another possible candidate is Ukraine. In recent months, reports have emerged that Iran has been supplying Russia with attack drones. And after the strike, a senior Ukrainian official tweeted that Iran had been warned. However, although Iran has asked Ukraine to explain this comment, few seriously believe that Kyiv was responsible. While it certainly has the motive, it would seem that it doesn't have the capacity to launch such a pinpoint attack on a country that lies a long way away. Still, a Ukraine link might not be entirely out of the question. Although Israel has been criticised for not openly siding with Ukraine against Russia, there have been reports that it has been helping out in other ways, such as by providing intelligence. This attack may have been part of this wider assistance, especially as it will have served several wider purposes. Meanwhile, the finger of blame has also been pointed at several other candidates. There have even been suggestions that the attack was launched from Azerbaijan. Over the past year, tensions have grown between Baku and Tehran, and in January there was an attack on the Azerbaijani embassy in Iran. Others have suggested that Saudi Arabia may have been behind the strike in retaliation for Iranian involvement in neighbouring Yemen. But as interesting as these theories are, the overwhelming sense is nevertheless that Israel was behind the attack. So, assuming it was Israel, this raises the next obvious question. Why hasn't it openly claimed credit for the strikes? After all, this would appear to be a significant and seemingly successful attack on an important facility. There are in fact a range of plausible answers. First, there may be operational and diplomatic reasons to keep it low-key. The flight path to Iran would necessarily cover several countries. Did they give their permission or not? Either way, the answer may be troubling for the states in question. Alternatively, it may have been launched from another country, which might not want to be publicly drawn into the discussions. Another potential argument is that there was no reason to escalate the issue at this stage. Israel did what it did, and that's all that's important. At home, people will know what happened, and crucially, Iran will too. The message is clear without having to be stated publicly. This would fit in with past practice. For example, Israel didn't confirm its attack against Syria for 11 years, even though most observers knew that it had been responsible. Finally, Israel might want to avoid antagonising Russia. As noted, it's been careful not to side with Ukraine since the Russian invasion, much to the anger and irritation of many Western observers. Leaving aside concerns about the safety of the Jewish community in Russia and the large Russian community in Israel, it's been pointed out that Israel needs to keep stable relations with Moscow over the conflict in neighbouring Syria, publicly admitting that it had taken out a drone factory that may have been involved in supplying Russia might have put pressure on Moscow to react. Of course, all this begs a final question. Why Iran has played this down? After all, it's long held Israel to be its key enemy. In truth, it too has several compelling reasons. For a start, admitting that Israel was able to carry out such a significant attack against a major military target is deeply embarrassing for the regime. Secondly, it would put pressure on Iran to retaliate. Quite apart from the fact that this would seem impossible, at least using conventional weapons, it would risk ratcheting up tensions against Israel and the West at a time when the regime is already weakened. In this sense, it would seem better to have played down the strikes. However, and importantly, this isn't to say that Iran won't retaliate. Assuming that this was in fact an Israeli attack, it's almost certain that Tehran will find a way to hit back, most probably through its Hamas or Hezbollah proxies in Gaza or Lebanon. But whatever really happened, the recent strikes, assuming that they were indeed carried out by Israel, are merely the latest example of a long history of serious tensions between Israel and Iran. A secret war that's been played out behind the scenes for decades. Before I go, I'd like to say a special thanks to the sponsor of today's video, the always brilliant World Politics Review. Do make sure that you take a look at the great offer for channel viewers. I put a link above and in the description below. In the meantime, if you want more from me, here's another video that you might find interesting. Thanks so much for watching, and see you in the next video.